Here's why the U.S. integrated kill chain stands apart. It does not wait for a formal declaration or a public countdown. It begins long before most people realize anything has happened, deep below the earth and deep inside the battle space, before a single Iranian radar operator fully understands that his screen is no longer trustworthy. At 1:03 a.m., not in Syria but in Iran, inside heavily protected centrifuge chambers, once considered untouchable, a 30,000-pound mass of hardened steel was already descending at nearly 800 miles per hour. This was the GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator, released from a B-21 Raider, cruising at 55,000 feet. The weapon was not designed to burst on impact. It was built to use pure momentum, drilling through roughly 200 feet of reinforced concrete and rock before its delayed fuse finally triggered. The effect was devastating. Iran's core enrichment infrastructure was transformed from a fortified asset into a buried ruin of fractured stone and shattered technology. And that was only the opening move. As debris settled across the mountain complex, the mission shifted into an entirely different phase. The B-21 did not simply turn and leave, it remained on station. Using its advanced active electronically scanned array radar, it began what can best be described as digital mapping and erasure. Within 6 minutes of the strike, the aircraft had located every active IRGC surface-to-air missile site within a 200-mile radius and transmitted those coordinates through a hardened satellite link to 4 F-35C Lightning IIs circling over the Persian Gulf. This was not just a precision hit on a single objective. It was the rapid dismantling of an entire defensive network in less time than it takes to make coffee. By 2:15 a.m., Iran's response came fast, and it came out of urgency. Unable to strike the B-21s they could not detect, Iranian forces turned instead toward the most visible symbol of American power in the region, the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group, calling the attack an act of international piracy, the IRGC Navy launched what it framed as Operation Great Prophet's Fury, sending out a swarm formation of 65 fast attack craft, including high-speed Zulfiqar-class boats, racing out from coastal caves near Bandar Abbas. The boats pushed forward at more than 55 miles per hour, zigzagging in unpredictable patterns meant to disrupt targeting solutions. At the same time, coastal missile teams launched multiple surface-to-surface weapons toward the carrier group. Inside the Ford's Combat Information Center, the warning came immediately. Iran had fired a saturation volley of 40 Nor anti-ship cruise missiles, their version of the C-802. Flying just 15 feet above the water at around 650 miles per hour, these sea-skimming missiles were designed to stay low, fast, and difficult to intercept. Iranian commanders understood they would absorb losses. They did not need every missile or every boat to get through. They needed only one successful hit on the Ford's flight deck to claim a strategic breakthrough. Their boats pushed in aggressively, crossing near the bows of U.S. escorting destroyers and forcing the American ships into a tighter defensive posture that reduced room to maneuver. For a brief moment, the pressure on the U.S. Navy became very real. What made the tactic especially dangerous was its layered design. While the fast boats drew attention and fire, Iran also deployed a specialized electronic warfare drone known as the Cyborg EW. Suddenly, the Ford's cooperative engagement capability, one of its most important defensive systems, began to flicker. Iranian operators had discovered a weak point in the sensor handoff process. For 120 tense seconds, the USS Gerald R. Ford was operating with partial blindness. The destroyers could still track incoming threats, but the data being passed to the carrier was being corrupted by the drones. The SPY-6 radar started showing false contacts inside the Combat Information Center. Under the red battle lighting, tension rose fast. 14 Nor missiles were still inbound, 15 miles away with only 82 seconds to impact. With network targeting compromised, the Ford had to fall back on point defense. Its RIM-162 Evolved Sea Sparrow missile launchers came alive. These interceptors, each worth about $1.8 million, formed the carrier's immediate shield. They launched in rapid sequence, 4 missiles every 2 seconds, pulling extreme maneuvers as they climbed into the night and locked onto the incoming threats. 12 of the Nor missiles were destroyed in dramatic mid-air intercepts. But the pressure did not stop there. While the crew focused on the missile threat, the fast attack boats reached the next phase of the engagement. At 2:40 a.m., as the Ford made a sharp turn to starboard to bring its close-in weapons into position against a closing boat, the sonar team detected a far more dangerous problem. Multiple smart mines had activated directly in the carrier's projected path. These were not old-fashioned drifting mines from another era. The standoff 02 was a microprocessor-controlled acoustic mine. It did not need direct contact. It waited, listening for the specific cavitation pattern of the Ford's 4 massive propellers. Suddenly, the carrier was boxed in. Continue the turn, and it risked entering the minefield. Stop, and it became a slower, more vulnerable target for the remaining fast boats armed with anti-ship missiles. From the Iranian side, it looked like an impossible dilemma. For a moment, the IRGC command likely believed it had achieved the unthinkable, a genuine checkmate against a U.S. supercarrier. But that moment did not last. High above the battlefield, the same B-21 Raider that had opened the night was still listening. It had been monitoring the IRGC's internal radio frequency triggers linked to the mines. This is where the U.S. system moved into territory that felt almost unreal. The B-21 was not acting only as a stealth bomber. It was functioning as a high-altitude cyber warfare node. It identified the digital handshake between Iranian Shore Command and the mine network. In less than 15 milliseconds, its mission systems broke into the encrypted Iranian link. It did not simply shut the mines down, it reassigned them. Reports came in quickly. The mines were releasing from their moorings. They were moving. Using a forged acoustic command delivered through a localized sonar pulse from a nearby U.S. Navy Snakehead unmanned underwater vehicle, American forces effectively told the mines that the target had changed. The weapons that Iran intended as a final trap suddenly began tracking the approaching IRGC fast attack boats instead. The water around the Iranian formation erupted. 6 underwater blasts, each with the force of roughly 500 pounds of TNT, tore through the lead elements of the swarm. The shockwaves alone were powerful enough to break apart nearby fiberglass hulls almost instantly. In seconds, the carefully prepared mine barrier had turned into a catastrophic reversal for the attackers. With the mine danger neutralized and the jamming source pinpointed by the B-21, the USS Gerald R. Ford regained full situational awareness. The response was immediate. Weapons free. One of the escorting Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, USS Winston S. Churchill, answered with a volley of RIM-174 Standard Missile 6 interceptors. These $4.3 million missiles do more than fly toward a set coordinate. Each one carries its own active radar seeker, allowing it to hunt targets independently. Racing across the Gulf at roughly 2,600 miles per hour, the SM-6s did not focus only on the fast boats. They also targeted the coastal launchers that had fired the earlier missile volley. At the same time, 2 F/A-18E Super Hornets, working from targeting data passed directly from the B-21 Raider, released AGM-158 CLRASM missiles. These stealthy autonomous weapons do not rely on constant pilot guidance. LRASM uses onboard intelligence to identify electronic signatures, reject decoys, ignore burning wreckage, and isolate the actual center of command. 4 impacts followed. 4 Iranian command boats were removed from the fight. To make sure the threat was fully shut down, the Churchill then launched a final wave of BGM-109 Tomahawk land attack missiles. Moving at about 550 miles per hour and hugging the terrain along Iran's coastline, the missiles traced valleys and ridgelines to avoid what remained of local radar coverage. Their targets were the coastal bunkers that had staged the attack boats. One after another, those bunkers disappeared in precise, controlled fireballs. By 3:12 a.m., the surface of the Persian Gulf was littered with burning wreckage, and the battle above the water was effectively decided. But beneath the surface, the conflict was still echoing through the seabed. The IRGC understood that their network would likely be the first target, so they prepared something different. A backup hidden on the ocean floor, completely mechanical and isolated. No signal, no connection, nothing to intercept. It was designed to activate only when everything else failed. A final contingency. A dead man's trigger the 5th Fleet didn't anticipate. Then the warning came. Sonar alert. High-speed subsurface contacts bearing 045. Speed 230 miles per hour. The voice of the sensor operator on the Ford broke for the first time. These weren't conventional torpedoes. They were Iranian Hoot supercavitating weapons launched from concealed underwater capsules and triggered by the heat signature of the carrier group's own defensive fire. Moving inside a bubble of gas, they behaved more like underwater missiles than traditional torpedoes. At that speed, the Ford had just 42 seconds to respond. Evasive maneuvers began immediately, countermeasures deployed. The USS Winston S. Churchill reacted in seconds, launching a RUM-139 vertical launch anti-submarine rocket. The system carried a Mark 54 torpedo into the air before dropping it into the water miles ahead. Once submerged, it activated its own sonar and moved to intercept. A violent detonation followed, sending a towering column of water skyward. But two more incoming threats remained. As the Churchill continued engaging below the surface, Iran's coastline delivered one final move. A concealed battery of Khalij-Fares anti-ship ballistic missiles, engineered to strike moving naval targets, launched from a hidden camouflage position that had gone undetected. The missiles climbed high into the atmosphere, accelerating to hypersonic speeds before beginning their descent. Now the battle stretched across every dimension at once. The Ford's defense systems responded instantly. Rolling airframe missiles were launched for close-range protection, while additional SM-6 interceptors were fired to engage the ballistic threats in their final phase. High above the carrier, intercepts occurred in rapid succession, the resulting shockwaves rippling through the air and vibrating across the ship's structure. Below the surface, the Churchill's final countermeasure connected. The last incoming torpedo was stopped just 400 yards from the carrier. It was the final surge. Iran had committed everything. Layered defenses, unconventional tactics, and last resort systems designed to activate when all else failed. But the U.S. system held. It adapted in real time, absorbing pressure and responding faster with every second. By 4:30 a.m., the Persian Gulf had gone quiet, broken only by the sound of aircraft launching into the early light. The fast attack boats were gone. The mines were no longer a threat. The coastal launch sites had been eliminated. The strategic consequences were significant. Years of investment into anti-access and area denial systems had been disrupted in a matter of hours. Facilities once believed to be unreachable were no longer operational. Capabilities that formed a core part of Iran's regional leverage had been severely degraded. The numbers tell their own story. Iran lost a substantial portion of its naval assets, multiple command nodes, and a notable share of its missile inventory. The U.S., while expending high-value precision munitions, maintained a far lower overall cost relative to the scale of global trade routes and strategic stability involved. So why was the outcome so one-sided? It wasn't just about firepower. It came down to information. Speed of data, integration of systems, and the ability to act instantly on a complete picture of the battlefield made the difference. While Iranian units relied on fragmented communication under pressure, U.S. forces operated through a unified network, processing, sharing, and acting in near real time. This wasn't a single platform dominating the fight. It was a system of systems working together. What looked like a traditional naval target was actually part of a much larger, connected structure. Every sensor, aircraft, and ship contributed to a shared awareness that allowed decisions to happen faster than the opposition could react. From the outside, it may seem almost unreal. For the crews involved, it was the result of preparation, coordination, and technology working in sync. Which moment stood out to you the most? The rapid coordination across air, sea, and subsurface domains, or the way different systems work together under pressure? Share your thoughts below.